big man, strong. But it's more the strength of character, the courage that gave courage to others.
He was my husband. He was a man to ride the rivers of life with.
My father set a standard for us to live by.
My dad was a career military officer, a very good fighter pilot, good at what he did, able to make decisions.
Tony was doing what he felt was the right thing to do in serving his country.
We wanted to know if he died to have something to face and move forward from. And uncertainty was like a lack of truth, a void of truth.
When Tony was leaving for his second tour of duty in Vietnam, I gave Tony a note to take with him. In it, I quoted Joshua 1:9. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and of good courage. Be not fearful or dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go.
My dad was flying an A-7D on the border of North Vietnam and Laos at the very end of the Vietnam War, and his plane disappeared below a cloud covering.
What were your thoughts? What were your aims? How did you feel as you went down in flames? Were you then captured? Did you then die? Have you been brainwashed? Do you still cry?
Our government was sort of asking all the families to be very quiet about this. They said, you know, don't talk, don't tell your story, you might jeopardize your loved one. My mom was 29 and she had 3 kids. Shannon was 3 years old. I was 8 years old. My brother Tony was almost 11. And she had a whole government to battle, not only our own government, but the governments in Indochina. For 14 years, we didn't hear anything about his fate. He literally disappeared. In 1987, a Laotian refugee sent word that he had information on my father, and he actually said that he had my father's remains, and to prove part of that, he enclosed a picture of my dad's dog tag. It was the first time that we had heard anything about him from anyone. It was the first time that we knew for certain that someone knew his fate. I decided in 1993 I really needed to kind of take a Sherlock Holmes effort to this, or we were never going to know. And I remember sitting down and reading through every report that we got to sort of familiarize myself with the case and the terrain and the people and the incidents and the interviews and the reports that had come in since the day that he disappeared. Just copies of letters that I've gotten on the different reports. Sends you things that have blackouts because they don't give you sources of information. Bones that they originally thought might pertain to him, they were in fact not that of my father. And in doing that, I was able to sort of meet with and work with our government to say, have you thought of this? What about this? What about this? And as they pursued some of the leads, one of the things that they did was find a tentative crash site in the general vicinity of where my dad was last known to be alive. They met with this one witness, and he had a helmet that he said was his memento of the war. Our government said it had no identifiable markings, therefore it wasn't retained or photographed. They said, there's nothing further to learn. There's nothing that we can do now to learn your father's fate. If I was going to have to accept uncertainty in my father's case for the rest of my life, I really wanted the word Vietnam to be more than a war. I wanted that word to ring memories of a people and a culture and a land. We rented a Russian Jeep and drove for several days down to the village where the U.S. government had gone, where the witness was, where the crash and gravesite were.
How many times do you think we've broken down today?
About 5 or 6.
I think
I remember thinking, I'm going to be able to stand in this place and know that this probably is the place where my father lost his life. We asked the witness if he would take us to the crash site and to the burial site, and he agreed to do it.
You saw it first before it crashed?
Thế là cái máy bay này khi ông nhìn thì nó đâm xuống hay là nhìn trước khi đấy thì ông có nhìn thấy không?
I thought that it would be a barren mountain because everything had been sold for scrap metal and scavenged by these villagers. I started finding things on the surface, pieces of aircraft and pieces of wreckage. We sat in that grave for hours.
Our government doesn't do that.
Yes, because you know that the Vietnamese people.
It was what my mother and my grandfather had done before me. It was trying to find the best way to elicit the information that you knew existed and didn't know how to get. I asked the villager if I could borrow the helmet that our government said that he had. As I got into the Jeep to leave, it was the first time I really looked at the helmet, and I had it in my hands and I turned it over and I almost fainted. My father's name is in this helmet. I just couldn't believe it. It is our government's obligation to learn my father's fate as well as those of all of the other men who are still unaccounted for in Southeast Asia. I met with Undersecretary of Defense, eventually met with President Clinton, testified before Congress, all to try and say, use this case as an example, this shouldn't be happening.
You don't think Vietnam has cooperated at all. What can be done so we get more answers from that country?
Vietnam could allow us access into crash sites. They could provide us some of the war records and archived information that they have on our missing and perhaps prisoners. They could return remains that are readily available to them, stored.
The U.S. government did go back in, and they thoroughly excavated both the crash and the grave site. They actually found pieces of my father's aircraft with his serial numbers. They found his dog tag, and they found more remains in the grave site. And they tested the DNA, and there is a match. My father was missing for 23 years, and now we learn his fate. It's not that we have an end in finding my father's bones, but that we have a beginning, that we have a truth to move forward from. I wish that America would find a way to tell the truth and then move forward from that.